Thank you very much, Larry. I think the phrase, if you are on a hot date, you can switch it to lava lamp mode, probably means that we can reasonably accurately date certain events historically, and can also reasonably assume that those historical events featured flared trousers and brute aftershave.
Yes.
So,
splash it all over.
interesting what you're saying about your car saying it's time for an oil change, etc. The harvest before this one, I was talking to a farmer friend of mine, and his pal had bought a big new class combine harvester from Holland, and when he went to start it up in time for harvest, it wouldn't go, and they're very competent people, so they spent about a day trying to get this to go, and eventually gave up, called the mechanic turned up with a computer, the computer was plugged in, and he went, He says, what is it? He says, you're behind with your payments. And they'd switched it off. He made a payment, they switched the combine harvester back on, he could get on with his work. Interesting. Can I ask our first two speakers to come back up again as well, please? There's an opportunity to ask some questions here. If you've got anything specific, I would say for Greg, can you be quick? Because he needs to leave here by 6. He's got a flight at 7:30. And Edinburgh traffic being what it is, just about as bad as San Francisco, if not worse at times, he will need to leave at 6. So, any questions? Gentleman at the front here again. Can we get a microphone down to this gentleman here, please? You stick up your hand again, please, sir. Okay. That's fine. You could just introduce yourself again. Thank you.
Hi, guys. I'm Christopher. So with the Internet of Things is the perfect example. Going back to actually conversations from all three speakers, we're collecting all this data, huge amounts of data being collected that we're not even aware of as we walk down the street, or, the phone picks up an iBeacon, suddenly my IDs are captured, whatever else. Do you feel consumers or people in general have the right to know what information is captured about them, have the ability to get rid of that information or say, no, that's mine? Anything of the sort? I mean, especially with all of this about to massively explode.
I have to be careful here because obviously a lot of businesses now, internet-based business, technology businesses are based on data collection. I think that one thing we all have to bear in mind is that no one's doing it because it's out of the kindness of their hearts. They want to help you to use their services so they can collect data about you. Google's a fantastic example of a company that basically, we all have a deal with Google. The deal is that we can use their fantastic software, which we all do. Part of that is that it learns iteratively from whatever we put into it. So Google Translate, a fantastic example. People who are bilingual are effectively putting translators to some degree out of work because they're handing over their ability to translate language. So I think we have to be very careful. I think that long term there might be a different relationship between technology companies and consumers. There was a really good book by a guy called Jaron Lanier, who's a big thinker, an internet thinker, called Who Owns the Future, and he posits ideas like every time we put a piece of data onto the internet, whatever that is, whether that's turning a light on or whether that's so we reveal our schedules, or whether that's posting a YouTube video, somehow there becomes a unique identifier to that piece of data, and that in some way technology companies will pay us back by tiny little micropayments on every piece of data that we put out there. And I think that increasingly, as people become aware of the amount of kind of money that's being made and the sort of services that are being built on the back of their data, I think those kind of discussions will begin to occur. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, actually. You read recently about the naked celebrity photographs, and I think literally within a week of that hitting the press, both Google and Apple announced that they were going to encrypt all of the content on their respective clouds, and that you would have the encryption key on your device, and therefore they wouldn't have access to that information. Of course, clearly they hadn't figured out a way to monetize naked celebrity photographs yet when they decided to do that. But
If you can't monetize that, what can you monetize?
what can you monetize? Yeah, that's an opportunity right there. But
Phone Paul Raymond.
exactly. But I think it's interesting that this is an evolving space, right? We're still trying to figure out, the legality, the morals, the ethics, and the business around all of this. And I think it's. But I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of your data, and we do cede some rights to that data in order to as a form of payment to consume services. And I think over time we're going to have to figure out what we're comfortable with.
I was kind of chilled, Chris, I must confess, when the image went up of those little sensors. My first thought was, wouldn't that be fantastic if you had small children in a crowded space and what have you could put on? And that's fine if you've got a 5-year-old toddler or something like that. At what age does it become unacceptable to put those things on your kids? 12? 14? Do you want to know what the hell they're up to? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. It's a serious question.
There are actually at least 2, I think, well-known services that you can register with to get the inherent location data from an arbitrary cell phone number now. So
and how about your wife, your husband, all that kind of stuff? It's horrific.
Yeah, discover your partner's having an affair via the internet. Yeah. It's not far off. But yeah, you can basically go to these services, give them a telephone number, give them a credit card, and they'll basically send you a bunch of SMS messages telling you where that phone was last pinged. So you don't even need a different device yet. I mean, if your dog had a cell phone, you wouldn't need the collar with the GPS and the SMS system on it. But your kids, you can track fairly effectively already.
What do you reckon, Chris?
There's a lot of discussion around, particularly around policy concerning people's understandable worries about privacy and how data will be used. I think there's a flip side to this. So I'll give you a concrete example. One of the research interests that I've had for the last few years has been connected with the example I started with, the snow example, epidemiology. So I do a lot of work with the University of Manchester looking at the causes and effects of asthma in children, the way that develops. And so we have, and one of the things we know about asthma is very complex. There isn't a simple cause. We know that there are genetic factors, we know that there are environmental factors, and it's now been shown that there are interactions between genes and environment. That is, if you have a particular genetic makeup, then growing up with furry animals in the house can be problematic, and if you have a different genetic makeup, then it isn't. Now, the medical domain, I think, is an interesting one. You talked about the sort of the pacts that you have with Google or with Amazon or with a commercial company. There you are giving up information, and in return you're getting a service. I mean, recommendation engines I love. I buy a lot of stuff on the basis of recommendation engines. It's sort of very targeted advertising. Yes, actually, I didn't know that it exists, and I'm really glad you told me. I'm very happy to buy it, and I'm happy that you advertise that to me. And I'm sort of happy to release this information. I'm getting something in return. The medical domain, and by the way, I should say that my view of this is that this is going to be bigger than antibiotics, x-rays, everything put together. If we have the data, the full longitudinal, through time, health records of millions of people, along with their environmental, detailed, day by day, minute by minute environmental information, together with their DNA sequences, and we aggregate all that information and analyze it, that will be tremendously powerful. Yep. Just look at the fact that we discovered a causal relationship ultimately between smoking and lung cancer. Now that killed 100 million people in the 20th century, right, compared to 50, 60 million in World War II. It's enormous. That's just one disease, one cause. That's enormous. This could transform medicine, but it requires getting the data from millions of people, aggregating it. And there's a difference, I think, compared to the example you gave, which is that let's say we have an opt-in. Maybe half of you opt into this and half of you don't. What I can't do ethically, I think, I'm not an ethics expert, but I suspect I can't give the benefits of that only to the people who opt in. In a commercial setting, I can do that. Sorry, if you want the benefits that I'm offering in my service, you have to sign up and allow me to store your data and so on. I don't think you can do that in the medical domain. And I'm not a policy expert, but what I hear about some of the policy discussions, particularly in Brussels at the moment, is a tendency to lurch to an extreme, to lock things down, to give people total control, total privacy, a sort of very extreme position, and I think there isn't a good enough understanding amongst those who are having the policy debate of the enormous benefits which this technology can bring. And healthcare is a very obvious one, the clear societal benefit. So I just worry that we'll lurch too far in the other direction, lock everything down, and we'll throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that will cost lives. You won't be able to say it cost that person's life, but statistically it will cost lives if we get that wrong.
Okay, before
shut down to be 3andMe, doesn't it? At the moment, you can't actually get any genomic information. They're just releasing the ancestry information at the moment, and as you say, that is going to cost lives because it holds back research and it holds back, what we can do with that data. I think in the UK though, and in Canada, that information is we're allowed to discover it. So presumably that means we can move forward with that. And I guess also when we have we have a nationalised healthcare system in this country, and I think I'm right in saying, I could be wrong, that we have. We're in the process of creating an enormous database with genomic information. That's correct, right?
It's a mixed history. We had Connecting for Health, which was, I think, a £14 billion project that didn't really deliver what it was supposed to. So there's a mixed history. I think the UK is probably the leader in terms of first care, primary healthcare. So when you go and see your GP, I think there were something like upwards of 10 million people in the UK were, through their GPs, signed up to a centralised repository of this information. But it's very impoverished, and if my health records, what are they, scattered on bits of card across the country, different sizes. It's a total mess. And if I'm knocked over in the street, actually, I don't want my data to be private. I want the doctor to know everything about me, everything I'm allergic to, the whole thing, right? I want to have that information like that. So we've got to be careful that this is a balance, and we must see the benefits of the technology as well, I think.
Greg,
I
thank
think
you
I
very
need to
much.
make a move.
You better like it.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you one more time. Joking aside, about 6 months ago, I went in to get minor surgery done on my face, and the surgeon said, fine, if you could take your shirt off. So I'm like, okay, fine. So I took my shirt off, and I'm standing there, and he said, where is it? I said, where's what? He said, the AK. And I went, there. And he went, what? Oh, chest. And basically, he'd misread the notes. So there are real advantages to having it there. But I mean, just out of curiosity, I mean, you are all industry insiders. Hands up if you have a niggle, a doubt even, about this dissemination of information, the fact that we will become part of the Internet of Things. Put your hands up.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Hands up if you don't. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Another question. Here. Just wait for the mic to come to you. Okay.
Got a question for Professor Chris. How many features do recommendation engines such as Netflix, Google recommendation engine, or Google advertising engine take into account when making recommendations?
Okay, how many features are taken into account when something like Netflix is making recommendations?
Right. Let me give you a rather generic answer because I'm not familiar with, obviously, what other companies do. But generically, the answer is it's surprising what things can be correlated and therefore can add value. So I guess if it's movies, we'd expect age, gender probably would be factors that might influence your movie preferences. But it's quite interesting that we did a study recently, some people in my group did a study in collaboration with the University of Cambridge, in which they essentially they created a website which offered a free service, which was psychometric tests, the big 5 personality traits, and it offered these detailed psychometric tests for free, so you could do this test. And then you could opt in and allow the site, for research purposes, to have access to your Facebook profile. And something like 50 or 60,000 people were happy to opt in. So we had data then, where we had somebody's Facebook likes, and we also had information on psychometrics. We knew something about their personality, we knew about their gender, their age, their sexual orientation, political preferences, things which many people might consider to be quite sensitive information. And we could just do simple correlation. So effectively a very simple machine learning system that would take these Facebook likes and try to predict some of these. And of course, you can't predict it perfectly for an individual, but in a statistical sense, you can do better than random. And it's quite interesting that it was what you might call sort of 90% accurate on some of these traits from things which were rather surprising. So if you like to eat curly flies, or you listen to Mozart, or that would correlate with your IQ. And so if your goal is simply to make good predictions, roughly speaking, purely from a technological point of view, set aside privacy and everything else, you just want your technology to work as well as it can do, you tend to hoover up all the different features you can, because the machine learning technology can combine lots and lots of weak signals and extract a stronger signal. And it can even tell you that some signals are so weak that actually in future you don't really need those, they're not adding value, so save some compute, some storage or whatever, don't use those. So generally speaking, one of the things machine learning does is to correlate information from multiple sources, and they might each be individually quite weak, and yet together you can find a strong signal. And that's one of the reasons why I think the technology is a lot more powerful than it might appear to be, because it seems, well, if I can measure something out there with one of my 50 billion devices, then I know what it is. I know the temperature in that particular place. But actually, if I correlate data from larger numbers of sensors, then you can learn things, and I guess this is my sort of general thought on the Internet of Things, is that, it's sort of a rambling answer, but the answer generally is pull in data from lots of different sources. So the Internet of Things, the fact that I can switch my telly on and off, fridge on and off from home or something, or I can whatever, to me is not very exciting, right? Because I can already do those things. It's just a better switch. Okay, yep. It might be, there might be money to be made out of it. I might even buy one myself, but it's just a better version of something we already have. To me, the really exciting thing about the Internet of Things is where we have something qualitatively different, something which we could not possibly do in any other way before, that is only possible because we can correlate data from millions of sensors. And I can't begin to imagine the services, the technologies that will enable, but that is qualitatively new. And that's the thing that excites me about the Internet of Things, not be able to control my garage doors or whatever.
I'm sure it wasn't an accurate representation when you did the movie example. But there was a wonderful moment where, people who liked watching Mel Gibson's The Passion, a very graphic representation of the crucifixion, also liked Ace Bigelow, Male Gigolo. Thought, maybe no. I'm not sure I'd gone down that line. We've probably got time for one last question if there is one. Gentleman at the back there with the glasses. Right.
Hi, it's a question on the recommendation engines of machine learning. Is it plausible that such systems or algorithms could train me? For example, if your system thought that Pretty Woman was on the far right, I wouldn't particularly like it. Could it calculate a stream of content to feed me that would turn me into a more likely consumer of Pretty Woman?
That's a very interesting question. Let me go halfway towards answering that question, which is, if you're a recommendation engine, it's got a bit of a trade-off. And this is a very, very general point, again, about data. Let's think of that recommendation engine. All it's doing, all the demo is doing, is for every movie giving a probability that you'll like it. We call that the inference stage. We then have to do something with that. We call that the decision stage. What should I do about that? If I'm operating a recommendation service or a movie streaming service, which movies should I show you? So naively, you might think, just show you the movies down the right-hand side, the ones high probability that you'll like them. There are a couple of problems with that. One is sort of diversity. So, the first movie you liked was romantic comedy, and from now on, all you ever get is romantic comedy movies, and, maybe you like them all, and it keeps reinforcing, and it doesn't discover that you like action-adventure. So there's diversity. There's also learning, because every time the service recommends a movie to you and you watch it, or maybe you stop after 10 minutes and you don't watch the rest, it's learning. All right? So it's another data point that goes potentially back into the learning system. Whether the system works this way or not depends on the particular system. So from a mathematical point of view, the movie which you should be shown to maximize the information gain is the one in the middle, 50-50, which is sort of intuitive. If it shows you one that you're almost certain to like, then very probably you'll like it. It won't learn very much. If it shows you one that you're very unlikely to like and you do like it, it will learn a huge amount, but that's very unlikely. And the balance is actually in the middle. Sort of, intuitively, I should show you the movie that it's most undecided about, because when you rate that movie, it will learn the most, or the maximum information gain. So there's always this trade-off in systems between giving you what you want and learning more about you. I think what you were talking about was sort of a step beyond and sort of, altering your state of mind. And I think there have been some experiments on essentially feedback on websites to try to make you happier and that sort of thing. I mean, it's a very, very interesting domain.
If you don't mind, I'm going to slightly bend your question, because as a program maker, one of the things that would worry me is that commissioning editors got hold of that information and made all future decisions on what people might like based on what they'd liked in the past. And that's a really bad formula for making programs. There's no sort of sense of innovation involved in that at all. And it's why we end up with, you go through phases of it's gardening programs or DIY programs or, whatever, or God knows, dancing programs, anything, but... all commissioning editors will have to produce something like that, and it worries me that, have you got a view on that?
No, I agree with you. I think, there's a very fine line in these systems. When I worked at Amazon, we spent a lot of time doing analysis, both at the personal level, but also at the macro level. We would look at trends in various areas. When the latest Harry Potter book came out, if you looked at all of the previous Harry Potter books, you would see little spikes in the sales of those, because somebody would see Harry Potter 7's out, and then they go, gosh, I didn't buy Harry Potter 6, and so we would do all sorts of analysis like that, and then suggest to you that we not only will we sell you Harry Potter 7, but we'll sell you Harry Potter 6, at a discount. And, there's a lot of, but you're right, there is this fine line where you're right. I mean, you don't want to pre-select based on the past successes or failures.
It's sort of a trade-off, isn't it, between the immediate future and the long-term future.
Exactly.
So in terms of the long-term future, yes, you want more diversity so you can really understand somebody better and make better recommendations. But if you only care about the very next thing, then you should give.
And I think that comes to your point about picking or recommending something that is borderline, right? Because then you learn more information about the individual when they finally come back and say, yeah, actually, I hated that movie. Well, whereas...
I'm sure it's entirely apocryphal, but apparently when Kenneth Branagh remade Shakespeare's Henry V, they had to give it a different title in America because they were convinced that people would think, my God, we've missed Henry 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what's the point? We're going to go watch that back, whatever.
Not entirely surprising.
Given the time, folks, I'm going to round it up there. You are more than welcome. They'd be delighted if you stayed for the champagne reception immediately afterwards. First and foremost, can I ask you to thank our last two speakers here? Chris and Larry, thank you. Can I also ask you to show your appreciation for Scotland IS, who've put together a stunning programme of events today. I hope you've enjoyed it, you've found it useful. It ain't over yet. If you're staying for dinner tonight, I hope you enjoy that too. So can we just thank them as well, please? Thank you. As said, champagne reception is just about to start. I'm Mark Stephen. Thank you very much for your attention. Good evening. Right.